To make this movie, 900,000 gallons of water was used. Now, if you've ever seen this movie, that will not be hard to believe. And no, it's not Waterworld that we're talking about here. We'll talk about this story and more next. Hi everyone, welcome to Reto Flicks. This is your channel for TV and movie retrospectives. Today we have basically it's a cult classic from the mid-80s, from 1985. This is a movie that when you were just about to be a teenager and just in the teenage range, which I was at this time, it was a movie of exploration to me. I remember I grew up in a rural area and had a set of woods, trees, forests behind the house. And after seeing this movie, it made me think, well, maybe I could go back into the woods and find hidden treasure, or maybe I'll find this hole or something that would lead to some other world, some sort of trap door under the leaves, and that sort of thing. But it was innocence. It was innocence, and it was those thoughts, and that perhaps maybe there is something there, and that excitement. And so, I remember this movie, and it converged with something else, and we'll talk about that later. It converged with something else that was pretty big at that time, especially for boys at that age, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'm just going to go right into it now. Our movie today is The Goonies, 1985. The Goonies is about a group of kids who live in the Goondocks. So obviously Goonies, that's where they get the Goonies. The Goondocks was a nickname basically for a neighborhood of Astoria, Oregon. And their community of Astoria is threatened with foreclosure. And so these kids tried to save their community and save their town, and while doing so, they discover an old treasure map that takes them on an adventure to unearth the long-lost fortune of One-Eyed Willie, who is a legendary 17th century pirate. Now, during this, there's also a family of criminals who want that same treasure. So it is them, rivaling who's going to get this treasure. Now I'm just going to go into the production of this movie. As you watch my videos, typically I go through a cast. I'm not going to do that in this movie. It was a lot of child actors there at that time. They're preteen and teenage. But I'm not going to go into the cast. What I am going to do is I'm going to go into production, and we'll say that, and we'll start out by saying the director, Richard Donner, one of the things he noted was because of the age of the child actors and little experience they had at the time, that it was difficult, but also there was a positive aspect. He also said there was a lot of pleasing times working with them, but sometimes there's some difficulties working with them too with their inexperience, and so he had to do a lot of coaching with them to get the desired performances that he wanted from the movie. Example, to get the performance he wanted and the reaction he wanted, and when they built the pirate ship in the scene in the movie, they decided not to let any of them see the pirate ship until they were ready to shoot a scene, and then their reactions were going to be very authentic with that. He was afraid if they showed them before, that could maybe have a negative impact on when they shot. So they wanted to see that surprise and the shock in their eyes, which is what they wanted as a performance, and that was real because they hadn't seen that, they didn't know about it. So that's just an example of what they did with the actors there. The movie was shot in location in Astoria. So Astoria is a real town in Oregon, and but there were sound stages that were made that were used in Hollywood as well too for it. For example, the underground scenes in the pirate ship that we just had mentioned. Anything dealing with those were in a large sound stage in Hollywood. But most of the other stuff was set in Astoria itself and was shot on location. We'll talk a little bit more about down here a little bit later. The soundtrack is really well known for this movie, and the soundtrack, it went to 73 in the Billboard 200, but it's really known for, I guess, one song, and that is "The Goonies Are Good Enough" by Cindi Lauper. Now, if you grew up back at this time, you know Cindi Lauper, you know that that music, and "The Goonies Are Good Enough" was probably the seminal song of this album, I think, bar none. And it also, this movie and this video too also brought to light this convergence of really two booming entities at the time. And they decided to make a business with one another. And that was not only MTV, who was out for about 4 years at this point, but then professional wrestling. Now, as a boy around 13, 14, and 15 at that time, I mean, wrestling was just, I watched it all the time, And when MTV and in this specific situation at the time, World Wrestling Federation, now known as World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, but I'll refer to as WWE. When the WWE and MTV converged, it was huge. And this movie, they continued that. This movie was released in June 7th of '85, which was about 10 weeks after the first WrestleMania, which was just enormous, and it got bigger every year after that for the most part. But that was such just a phenomenal thing with wrestling, was that first WrestleMania. And I've seen a lot of biographies on it, but Cindi Lauper was a big part of that, And then they brought that into the Goonies, and so the Goonies Are Good Enough. That song, they made a video, and in that video, they put professional wrestlers in there, and this video was showed all over MTV. So they continued that, which they called the Rock and Wrestling Connection at the time. It was called the Rock and Wrestling Connection, and they built that up to that Rock and Wrestling Connection. They built that up to the first WrestleMania. And then, of course, continued it on the Goonies. And then the video that was showed all over MTV had professional wrestlers like Roddy Piper and the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov and Captain Lou Albano, the manager, they were just huge figures back at that time. And so there's that connection there that the Goonies had at that time, which was just and brought that MTV and professional wrestling in, and it was just absolutely huge, and that helped obviously with this movie as well. Now, principal photography went from October of '84 until March of '85 for the Goonies. So, as you see, it ended just about when we just talked about the Rock and Wrestling Connection, just about when WrestleMania 1 was to begin. The Goonies wrapped up production. As far as the box office goes, it did $63 million in U.S. and Canada, making it the 9th highest grossing film of 1985. And it would go on to gross $125 million worldwide on a $19 million budget, so very successful. And the legacy, it continues. It is really looked at as a cult classic now for sure. And the legacy continues. As a matter of fact, they have special events in Astoria, Oregon, with, over the years, thousands upon thousands of people have showed up there. And then you also have, there was actually in 1985 a video game that was called The Goonies that was brought by Commodore and Atari Commodore 64 and Atari 8-bit family, and Apple II had it as well. So, there was a legacy there. Obviously, the video game just came right after the video, but I mean, as far as a long-lasting legacy, I think it's interesting how the city of Astoria still today gets people there to visit with the Goonies, and not only just people my age that were teenagers at that time, and it was such an influential movie, but even younger generations are as well too. So just a phenomenal movie. If you haven't seen it, please go and please stream it sometime. If you have, I think you'll really enjoy it. If you haven't seen it for a long time, watch it again. I just watched it the other day, and I still enjoy the movie even today. And I hadn't seen it for a long time until then, But I figured I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to do this as an episode, so I'm going to screen it, and I did, and still enjoy the movie. Where can you, if you haven't seen this, or if you haven't seen it for a long time, want to watch it, where can you stream this? It's on AMC Plus, also Sling. You can get it on Prime Video, which is where I watched it, Apple TV, or Vudu. So those are three of the places you can get the Goonies right now. So if you watch this and comment below, tell me what you think of this movie, and if you have seen it before and you want to rewatch it, or give me some stories that you have of this movie. Like I said at the beginning of the video, for me, it was just, after watching this movie as a kid, wanting to go out and explore in the woods and see if I can find, hidden treasure, or hidden doors, or what have you. That was kind of, and of course the wrestling connection was a big thing for me too, and I loved that video and watching the wrestlers, because I was huge into that at that time, and I was a big Roddy Piper fan. So that's the connection I have too with the Goonies that I remember back at that time. Thank you very much for being here again, and I'm hoping to have another video at some point here soon. I am going to be leaving pretty soon to go on that excursion to maybe move. Again, when I'm away, I'm not going to be doing any videos until I come back, or till when I get to where I am. But I'm going to do the best I can to make that as short as time as possible, but I'm not sure. So but again, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And then of course, if you subscribe, then you can get whenever I do put something up, because I'm not letting the channel go. I just want everybody to know out there, I'm not letting the channel go. If I'm not around for a few months, I'm going to be back, because I love doing this and being with you guys. So please subscribe, and so when when I put something up. So I hope everybody has a great day, and that's a wrap.